Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 2 of the I Am Online experience. I'm Michelle Cachette, and tonight is Identity Unplugged, which is basically basically come as you are, kind of hang out. It's 7 o'clock my time. I ran off my husband and my children. I've never made grilled cheese so fast in my entire life. And I threw my family out the door and said, don't come back for a half an hour because I'm like Jesus that way. So we just sat down. We're getting started. Hopefully people will pop on here. I see 4 people are here. So you guys are starting to come on. Yay! And I know once again, I'm 3 minutes late. So let me just be clear about something. We have an enemy, and the enemy's name is the internet. So, and every time I try to do anything on the internet, there's always some kind of technical difficulty. And it's 6:59. We were on here 15 minutes early, 6:59. Everything went crazy. I had to restart my computer. So, you know, that happens. Meredith, Tanya, Wendy, Jana, so good to see you guys. Okay, so I'm gonna get started in a minute. I'm gonna introduce my guest in a minute. She's already there. But just pay no attention to the woman behind the curtain for just one moment. So in just a moment, we're going to dive into the topic, and I'm going to introduce my guest, but just a reminder, this is going to be about 20 to 25 minutes long. I want you guys to participate and engage, especially our Identity Unplugged session, because this is really about you guys. We want you to ask questions and interact and all that kind of stuff. So use the Facebook comments. We see them on our screen. And hey there, Monica, Lisa, Linda, Stacy, I'm so glad to see you. And use that to make comments, to interact with each other as well as us. And if you have questions, post them. We're going to do our best to answer your questions live. However, if we can't get to all of them, Sherry and I both will jump on Facebook afterwards, and we'll do our best to answer your questions there. So the conversation will continue. And for those of you that aren't able to join us live, we know that you're going to watch the video later, and we're just pretending that you're here in spirit, even though you may be sleeping in the UK right now rather than staying up till 2 a.m. chatting with us, which we understand. Nothing but grace. All right. So let's dive into this. Susan, Buck, Pam. I'm assuming it's Pam. But if not, hi, Buck. But I'm assuming it's Pam. Hi, Pam. And Danette. Oh, so much fun to see you. Okay, so let me introduce my guest, because this is one of my favorite people in the whole world. Basically, all my guests for the next 6 weeks, for the 6 weeks study, are my favorite people in the world, because that's who I like to hang out with. So tonight we have my good friend. She's an author, speaker. I told you on Monday, she's one of the most intelligent, brilliant people I know. Really, I mean, there are times that I wish I could take a scoopful of her brain and put it inside my own head. But she is quite amazing, and I love having conversations with her. On top of that, she's an input person like me. I might be going over the top on the introduction, but anybody that likes to take in input, like reading books and studying like I do, I mean, I'm a total nerd, but I love other nerds. It makes me so happy. So welcome to my good friend, Sherry Gregory.
Oh, I feel so welcome. I feel so at home with you.
Yay! And truthfully, the rest of you, Sherry and I could sit and chat like this all day. And many times we do that over text anyway. And so having y'all here is just like bonus. So, okay. So welcome, Sherry. Sherry has written several books, and she has so many more in her. So keep watching for them. But I do want you to know about her most recent book, which she wrote with Kathy Lipp. We had Kathy last week. It's called Overwhelmed. So, isn't it pretty? I had like 2 or 3 copies. It's
okay.
So
am I like overdoing it there?
Yeah, maybe. I searched everywhere for my copies. I have multiple copies. I endorsed the book, and I cannot find a copy to say.
Michelle, it's okay to admit you gave it away because you didn't like it. It's not a problem. We can be honest with each other here.
Whatever. All right. So anybody here overwhelmed, by the way? All you that are on here, we've got 30 or so on here. If you're overwhelmed, that's the book for you. There is one page in particular in that book that talks about, you'll be able to describe it, but it's your list of safe friends.
The safety sorter.
The safety sorter. So it's called the safety sorter, for you to be able to take your friendships and run them through the safety sorter to make a determination if that's really a great, healthy relationship or not. It sounds It's right. Oh my gosh, the whole book is worth it for that page alone. And what page is it, by the way?
Oh, it is page 198.
198, which proves, because I am a type A, proves that yes, I have indeed read the book. So I just want to say more than just the first 5 pages. So that was totally lame and vain of me, but we'll just let it be what it is. All right, so that page 198, the safety sorter, so helpful for me as far as just thinking through relationships. Look at everybody commenting, overwhelmed, yes, somebody is packing, holy cow, Jana, just stop packing, put down the boxes and grab something to drink. Speaking of, I am drinking tonight, every week I tell them what I'm drinking. Tonight I'm drinking lavender honey stress detox tea. I know.
I'm drinking pretty much the opposite. I've got black coffee in here, like straight black coffee. No cream, just caffeine. I think that rhymed.
Some of us can't drink coffee after pretty much 11 a.m. or I don't sleep at night. So I guess that means I'm old, but more power to you. There's no way that would happen for me. So I'm drinking my stress detox and you're drinking stress in the cup. So whatever. All right. So y'all know that this week's theme is, Carol, you're drinking the same tea. I'm hoping you're drinking my tea. I hope that means you're drinking the stress detox honey lavender tea. And that means you and I should be feeling really happy in about 30 minutes. All right. So our topic this week, you all know, is Exodus, which if you haven't seen the teaching on Monday, I highly recommend you go back and watch that teaching, because I really laid out the whole reasoning behind Exodus being the second part of the book. And really at the heart of it, it is you and I admitting that we have a sin problem, a brokenness problem. 2, owning the fact that we are powerless to solve that problem, that we have no power to cure our own disease. We just don't. And then 3, taking a position. And that position is one of humility. Helen's drinking whiskey. And she said, haha, not really. I wonder, Helen, were you the person that last week said you were drinking beer? I'm just curious because I'm starting to see a pattern. That's all I'm saying. Okay, she's kidding. All right, so we have own your problem, admit your powerlessness, take your position, which is humility. And some of you have been interacting. Kathy Lip! Hey, Kathy!
In the house!
Yay! So fun. Yep, I just had to put her comment up there because she's here. So really, this is laying the foundation before we can even go any further in our journey. Is this owning our sinfulness is really a key piece of us being grounded in who we are. So before I dive into any other questions at all, Sherry, I would just like to ask you to comment on that, because quite honestly, in our culture, this is not a powerful position when it comes to identity work. Our culture says to have a good identity, you just need to call out your best self and talk about how great you are and how wonderful you are and how beautiful you are. And yet this kind of journey that God takes us on through the gospel is a little bit different. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think you've got a little off, because the way that I lived much of my life was I was able to own other people's sinfulness. I was able to admit to other people's sinfulness. I'm really good at that.
Actually, I could have a degree in that. I could have my PhD in that. So yes, it's so true. Anybody else out there good at owning other people's problems and pointing out and either owning their problems by pointing it out or taking responsibility for other people's problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where we think it's our fault that they're doing what they're doing.
You mean it's not my fault?
No. So this is what you and I have talked about. We've talked about this idea of, and this was revolutionary for me this year, and I'll admit this here, realizing that I am the only person responsible for me, and only person responsible for me and my feelings. I am solely responsible for me and my feelings, but at the same time, I am absolutely not responsible for other people's choices or feelings. I mean, that's revolutionary to me. And I know you and I have talked about that.
Yeah, it's, I came up with a few weeks ago, part of it came from one of our conversations. I suddenly had this big epiphany that expectations are what I have when I'm fixated on somebody else's behavior, and boundaries are when I'm very clear about what my behavior is going to be. And, I have been wondering for the last month, why has this been so hard for me to wrap my head around? Because it's a cleaner way to live when other people live their life and I live my life. It's actually so much simpler. And I keep, with my kids right now, I'm really doing a radical parentectomy. And I keep finding myself trying to jump in. And so much of this is about what we don't do rather than what we do. That didn't come out right. So, never mind.
Somebody needs to add that hashtag in the comments, because
thank you so much.
Hashtag doo-doo is perfect.
Yeah, because it really, when I focus on the wrong things, that's what we end up with, is hashtag doo-doo. I overcomplicate, and then I bring drama into my life. And I've had loving people try to convince me over the years. I've owned Dr. Cloud's books. I think I probably have on my bookshelf every single one. I think I've probably read them. I've highlighted them. And for some reason, it just hasn't sunk in that, myself, I take care of me. That's boundaries. Other people over there, they take care of themselves. And thank you, Kendra. I knew I could count on a friend to do that.
Yay! Look at, we've got several people doing that.
Okay. Wait a second. Some of them are calling me a dodo. I don't know which is worse, doo-doo or being a dodo. Although I guess, boundaries, you are a dodo. So
exactly, when we don't know how to set boundaries on ourselves, and when we assume that other people's feelings are our responsibility, or other people's problems are our responsibilities, it creates doo-doo and we're dodos at the same time. So it all makes sense.
That's a really hopeful thing now that I feel like I'm starting to get a grip on it. And don't be sorry, this is too funny. We're going to be doing hashtag dodo for weeks now. But now that I feel like I'm starting to get a grip, I'm starting to recognize boundaries when I see it. Like not this week, but last week's This Is Us, Toby set a boundary, and I was like, that's a boundary. I recognize it when I see it. I still can't do it really well for myself. And in fact, you were on the text group earlier this week when I heard a rumor in my family and I was seeking help from my friends. Should I check this out or should I keep quiet about it? And, one of my 3 close friends was able to say, I think you keep quiet about it and don't make it a bigger mess. Don't get involved. Don't go outside of yourself and march into other people's lives where you're not needed. And I realized I was not concerned. I was curious. And I did not need to go down that curiosity rabbit trail. And so I feel like I'm starting to really recognize it. But I don't know, Michelle, how do you feel about being whatever age you are? Like, I have no idea what that is. You're so young. Whatever age you are, how do you feel about being this age and learning boundaries kind of for the first time?
Yeah, that's been really, well, at first I felt really stupid. I'm 46 years old. I've had 6 children.
No.
I have 6 children. And you would think that I understood boundaries and taking responsibility for myself and not taking responsibility for other people and all that. And honestly, I told you guys, this is Identity Unplugged. This is new for me in the last year.
Mm-hmm.
And probably more like the last 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
So how about you, Sherry?
I feel like the scales. I'm going to answer Helen. There's nothing wrong with being curious, but in this particular family situation, it was a meddling kind of curious. I wasn't actually concerned that anybody truly needed me. It was the curiosity that was like, oh, I'm bored with all the work I need to do. I don't want to actually work on my problems. I want to go jump on somebody else's problems and get involved and create drama, which will distract me from the hard work I need to do for myself. I'm sure nobody on here today knows what that's like. That's probably just goes on in my head and nobody else's, but I'll just kind of confess to it right here.
One person, Wendy, asked a question, and a couple of other people have chimed in. She's taking care of elderly parents who are very sick and they've been in and out of the hospital. And so when we're caring for people who, basically people we can't escape from, right? So people we can't just say, I'm going to choose to not be in relationship with you, but they're making choices that are directly impacting us. How have you learned to navigate those kind of boundaries when someone, even if it's unintentional, so like in Wendy's case, she has sick parents, and when we're sick, we don't always behave well.
Yeah.
But and so it's not necessarily intentional, it's just hard and it's making things harder. But some of us are living with people, spouses, children, other people who are literally sinning against us. Right? Who are making decisions that how do boundaries and having a sense of ourselves in those kind of sticky situations, how do you navigate that?
Oh, you're asking me like I'm some kind of expert. I'm like 6 months into this. Thank you. No, but those are the hard questions. Of course, if boundaries were easy, then we'd all be doing them really, really well. I mean, the first thing I'm going to say is if there's actual abuse going on, please see a counselor. Please reach out for help, because it is so easy to be the frog that gets, boiled alive as the water gets hotter and hotter. So if you're in that kind of a difficult situation, having some outside perspective, especially from somebody who's trained to see things, because otherwise we can go, oh, I just need to take it. Oh, I just need to take it. Oh, I'm not being spiritual enough. Oh, it's okay. I'll learn to deal with it. So I'm just going to say that and set it aside. I think this is one of those cases where pre-deciding is so important. Pre-deciding who I want to be in these hard situations, and recognizing that as much as possible, through God's power and grace, I can choose not to react. I can choose to respond. And that's actually the safety sorter that you said you liked in Overwhelmed. That's actually where that came from, was me looking and saying, I react to everybody as if they're the same. Like, I'm vulnerable with everybody. I want everybody to like me. I tell everybody my life story, and I'm hurt by everybody. And I realized that the people who are at the bottom of the safety sorter, that are not safe people, that, for example, I can talk about the weather with them, but I'm not going to tell them that I'm hurt. I'm not going to tell them I'm excited. I'm not going to tell them anything that any response that they could have would actually be painful to me. So if I stick to the weather and they whine about the weather or they're grouchy about the weather, that's annoying to me, but that's not going to be personally painful. But I mean, there are some people in my life that I can't really set boundaries with. They show up and they're in my life, and like, they disagree with everything I say. And it's relentless. And I used to keep trying to give them more and more and more of me, hoping to find the one thing
that's going to finally make them see the light.
Yeah. And this morning I sent you a Seth Godin thing, and he said some people are happiest when they're being adversarial. Like, that's what makes them really come alive. And I was like, oh my word. So all I'm doing by giving them more to disagree with and then being hurt is they're happy as a clam. They are thrilled, and I'm the one feeling crushed. And it doesn't mean I have, and let me be clear, I don't mean withdrawing. I don't mean being catty or sarcastic or passive aggressive or any of those things. I just mean literally, when you have a massage, the massage therapist just goes, if you're busy talking, maybe you don't talk during massage. I talk during massage.
I don't.
And they, but they never say anything committal. It's just this very non-committal, I heard you. And that's a very safe way to respond to somebody. And that takes a pre-decision, because I'll tell you, the moment some strong emotion starts to well up and I feel the need, the righteous indignation, then I'm starting to move into reaction, and reaction always gets me in trouble. Responding is response-able. That's what responsible means, but it has to be a pre-decided, pre-chosen response based on who I want to be. I want to take care of my future self, as Kathy would say, by making sure that in an hour from now or a day from now that I don't end up going, oh my word. And I mean, there's always grace and forgiveness for that, but I feel like I'm doing a slightly better job at realizing I can make choices now that I will really be grateful for tomorrow.
I love that you said, what was that last phrase that you said as far as, you talked about pre-deciding, the response able, and being very careful, being able to create space between stimulus and response.
Yes.
Is so key in navigating these basically navigating relationships with other Exodus people. That's what we're talking about, is how to navigate relationship with other people that have a sin problem, who have a brokenness problem, who are powerless to solve it. And part of that is creating a space between stimulus and response, so that way we can make decisions and not reactions. So key. Because then we operate from our truest self rather than our reactive self. And that's so critical. And creating that space is part of it. But the other thing that you hinted at that I want to go into now is realizing that you and I have choices about who we choose to share our most intimate self with. We have choices about that. And to be making those decisions about who we share with and what we share with them and to what extent. And then also realizing when some people are unable to give us what we need, and then seeking it elsewhere in healthy ways. One thing I wanted to share with those who are viewing this right now is over the last year, I've already shared this, but over the last year, I have done more, and that's since the book was done. I don't know what God was thinking, but hello, that would have been helpful as I was writing it. But I have done more identity work in the last year than ever before in my life, and I thought I had done a lot of work. But one of the things that was most surprising to me is the greatest amount of healing that has come to me in the context of safe relationship, of which, Sherry, you are one of them. You and I have talked about that. Well, let me just say it this way. Both Sherry and I have done hardcore identity work over the last, 10 months? 10 months. And one of, I have probably a circle of about 6 safe people and a therapist, because I firmly believe in therapy. We'll talk about that. But about 6 people. But Sherry is one of those 6. And one thing Sherry and I have done ongoing over the last 10 months is texting each other back and forth about our questions about boundaries and about what's appropriate and not appropriate and what's mine to own and what's not mine to own, and basically dialoguing with each other, some trial and error, because we don't always know what we're talking about. But what's been so beautiful for me is that, and I talked about this on Monday, what is broken in relationship is healed in relationship. Our relationship with God was broken in the Garden of Eden when sin entered the picture. The relationship was broken. God sent Jesus in the flesh, that's God in the flesh, to reestablish relationship with us. What was broken in relationship was healed through relationship. And I firmly believe this. Oh my gosh, I could go off on this for an hour. I firmly believe that we will only achieve a certain measure of healing in isolation. You and I will not achieve any kind of fullness of healing on this earth outside of the context of community and relationship. And you and I have experienced that as we've been processing through this with each other.
Well, and I think you make a really important point that you have a therapist, which means none of the rest of us need to play that role for you. And so the other thing that I think through trial and error we've gotten really good at is setting boundaries each time that we do text each other. Like if you didn't respond to me, I wouldn't feel like you hated me. All right. Now, I think early on we both struggled with that.
Because we didn't know. I mean, we were brand new learning about boundaries. So we were, of course, all of us, most of us on this video are women right now. I mean, all of us know this, right? When somebody doesn't call us back or text us back or respond or reciprocate, our first thought is that we've done something wrong. Or that something must be wrong with us. You guys can raise your hands in the comments and make me feel less alone in that. But I think that's what we do. We assume that there's a flaw in us and somebody, rather than assuming that there may be 100 other reasons why there was a lack of response.
Yeah. So I'll tell you the one thing that has been one of the many things that's been such a blessing for me is as I've processed some of the things that you've texted me about, and I'm busy texting you back to be as supportive as I can, to ask some questions. All of that is coming back to myself. And I'm realizing, hey, if I'm going to be compassionate to Michelle, I need to be this compassionate to myself. the things that I'm saying to you, God is speaking to me at the same time.
Some people are asking in the comments, which is really a great question, but they're saying, I don't have a safe person. What do I do if I don't have a safe person? How do I find one? A couple of things that I want to, I mean, I wish we had like a phone book where we can just look under S and find safe people. It doesn't work that way. However, I want you guys to think of a couple things. One, before you can find a safe person, you need to learn what it means to be a safe person. And so you really need to own your own journey, which is why you guys are here. You need to own your own journey of getting grounded in who you are, because you will not be able to sustain a healthy relationship if you haven't learned how to be healthy. And that's one thing I learned too, is the more that I work on my own junk, and we all have it, the more that that started to attract other people that were likewise owning their own stuff and working on it. There is some truth to that. Second, to remember, after you own your own stuff and be responsible for being a safe, healthy person, you have to be willing to take a risk. It's not like Sherry and I just bumped into one another one day and we both were wearing signs that said, hey, I'm a safe friend, let's be friends. I mean, there was none of that. We were very much in process. But both of us took a risk and said, hey, I wanted to process with you, and I feel like this is a safe place to do that. Are you willing? And there's risk there. And that's why that relationship sorter, what's it called? Safety sorter. In Sherry's book might be helpful for you as you basically put your toes in the water and explore new relationships. But it takes an initiative from somebody. They're not going to just show up on your front door. And so it's going to require risk, which a lot of us struggle with doing. So be aware of that. If you've done your work to know it's healthy, you will better be able to identify those people that would be healthy for you. The only other thing I wanted you guys to consider is, even though here in this Facebook group, we're not face-to-face necessarily, what we're doing in this Facebook group by texting, by typing into comments and responding to each other and interacting is precisely what Sherry and I have been doing for 10 months. Precisely. And even though Sherry and I have grown in our trust over 10 months, there have been times for both of us, especially in the first maybe 5 months, it felt risky, because anytime you choose vulnerability with anybody, it's risky. That's what vulnerability means. If you're exposing your inner organs and you're exposing your most authentic self. So those are just some reminders. And then, of course, and I don't throw this as an afterthought, but continue to pray about it. God wants you to live in community. Ask him to bring that to you. Okay, so going on real quick, and we're going a little late, but we're just going to add a couple more minutes, because I get to decide. As long as you don't mind, Sherry.
Oh, I'm here.
So this is a question I asked Kathy, but I think it's interesting to ask different people. So when you have a day where you're feeling self-doubt and insecure and whatever, what does your crazy making look like? So when you're feeling that insecurity and you start going off the rails, off of that old familiar pathway of insecurity, trying to feel more secure, that desperate place that we all can get to sometimes, what does crazy look like for you?
Crazy for me looks like calling up my two best friends, Ben and Jerry.
Yes!
You know, before social media, I'm trying to remember what it used to be like, but social media has really made it so that I tend to go and start scrolling. And I know, and you talk about this in your first book, I'm pinging. I'm trying to get some kind of a response. I'm trying, and really what I'm looking for is either to make something make me feel better, or sometimes I'm just looking for justification to feel as bad as I feel. And so lots of time wasting, lots of dinking around, puttering around, and getting absolutely nothing done. And the important part with that is what I really need to do is rest. I really need to go to my prayer chair. I really need to go pick up my Bible or a good book, or even lay down and put my feet up and close my eyes for 10 minutes. Because sometimes my crazy comes on because I am exhausted, but I don't give myself permission to rest, because that's only for people who are weak. And so it's this sometimes slow looking frenzy for something, anything to plug into, because what I'm after is connectedness. And I go to sources that do not offer actual connectedness.
I love that, because you gave us both kind of what your crazy looks like, but also your solution, what you need. Okay. And it's interesting. What you said, what you really are longing for in that desperate, crazy place is connection. But we often go to the least painful route to get it, which is actually too shallow, right? Because Facebook isn't going to really feel that need, or ice cream's not going to really feel that need. Was really fixed with a question. Let's see if I can find it. Rebecca asked, and Rebecca, this was such a great question. How do you make the exposure of yourself, like taking the risk to build that connectedness, less painful? And you and I just today, by the way, everybody, Sherry and I just texted today about the fact that avoidance of pain is something that we set very high on our list of things to do every day, especially in this whole context of identity. So I'm going to let you answer that. How do you make the exposure less painful?
I have the flip side problem. I do what Brene Brown calls abusing and using and abusing vulnerability. My habit is to go first and to overshare. And that way I'm in complete control and it's not really vulnerable. It's verbal vomit. And so for me, it's actually more risky for me to listen and to slow down and to try to understand somebody else. Because if I'm listening to what they're really saying, then that may well open a place in my heart that I wasn't planning to open, that I'm not able to keep under my illusion of control.
You know, I'm so glad that you pointed out that response, because I do think most of us tend to have more one or the other, these opposite responses. And our goal is to get more toward the middle, right? So you kind of do the verbal vomit. I do isolation. I shut down, withdraw, and shut everybody out because I don't want pain. And I love seeing the comments. Susan, Tracy, Meredith are saying, yep, me too, me too. I love that. I shut down and completely withdraw and push everybody away because relationship is so painful. But what happens is isolation is even more painful. So let's go back to the premise. How do we avoid pain? Here's the deal. I don't think we can.
No.
As long as you and I, all of you watching, you and me, Sherry, as long as we are in human flesh, pain is part of the deal.
Yeah.
And I know we don't like pain. I get it. I live with pain every single day. I totally get it. But pain is part of the deal. So one thing I'm learning to do is to befriend my pain. So rather than treating my pain as the adversary, becoming a student of it. Now, that doesn't mean we run into abusive relationships. That's not what I'm talking about. But simply being human is a painful existence. We know this, right? And so rather than letting pain become something that you always reject and run away from, what if you leaned into it just a little bit? What if you reset your expectation that avoiding pain wasn't even possible, and instead understood that pain is part of the process, but pain will be a great teacher. I will learn something. I may not stay in this friendship. This friendship may be painful, and I may not stay in this relationship, but the time will not have been wasted because I will learn something from it.
Absolutely.
You and I have talked about that, how we've got to change our expectation about pain.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
We're going to have pain, and so choosing that it's going to be the pain of failed relationships rather than the pain of isolating. And because isolation is another form of control. It says, I can't trust God to either lead me into good friendships or heal me after friendships go bad.
Yep.
And so what you're describing is the pain of risk.
Totally. And somebody commented that what I was sharing was a little bit Buddhist. And I hear you. I hear what you're saying. I promise you it's not Buddhist. But you go back to the New Testament and you talk about how suffering produces perseverance, which produces hope. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, this is a biblical concept that we should not despair when suffering comes, because suffering, when it has been allowed to be there for a while, produces great fruit
Mm-hmm.
for those who become students of it. I mean, this is, oh my gosh, our greatest salvation came at the cost of horrible pain. Thank heavens Jesus leaned into the pain. And I'll go back later and I will put more comments, verses in the comments here for you guys to have those. But there is, I promise you, there is nothing Buddhist in me. This is all me following Jesus's steps, and Jesus's steps were ones of suffering and pain. You read Isaiah, read the Gospels, you will see it everywhere. Read Paul telling God, he prayed again and again for the thorn to be removed from his flesh, and God, wouldn't do it. And he said, therefore, he's going to boast in his challenge, in his thorn, because when he's weak, then he is strong. No, Lisa, I know it wasn't a criticism. I totally know that. But I wanted to let you know that it was just my thought process through that. After going through so much suffering, I finally learned that really the struggle is even more valuable than the results. How would you, when you describe the last few months of your struggle with your old identity process, how valuable has the struggle been for you?
Oh, it's been transforming. And I'm still very much in the midst of it. One of the things you and I were talking about just this week is I think I'm finally starting to understand listening, like not jumping in to correct people, not jumping in to jump to conclusions, but just listening and holding off on that response. I mean, that's the kind of thing I wish I'd learned as a teenager. But I'm grateful. I mean, part of it is just also an increased sense of gratitude for whatever is going on, that instead of being bitter, instead of feeling ripped off, instead of that sense that I might as well isolate even more or take more control, I'm finding myself being more grateful for what I do have rather than cataloging all the things that I feel like have been withheld from me.
As a final wrap-up comment, we've talked about the struggle. I mean, really, truly, the work that I've been doing, and I know you've said this to me as well, over the last 10 months, it's been grueling. I mean, it's been really some of the hardest work I've ever done in my life. Lots of tears and lots of struggle, and because I'm learning new skills. I feel like a toddler learning to walk. But so we talked about the struggle. I want you to leave our listeners with and we're just beginning to taste the fruits of this struggle. Leave the viewers with what have been some of your greatest takeaways, gifts, surprises, things that are thrilling you to continue this journey.
I'll just give a couple examples from this weekend. I got to spend it with Kathy Lipp. We were at a retreat center and she was the main speaker and I was doing a workshop. And two things. One is the women they loved her. I mean, she killed it. She did a great job. And the women were coming up to her and telling how appreciative they were. And I sat back and I was able to just be fully present, enjoying my friend being herself, enjoying the women, enjoying her. And I kept thinking, am I feeling any envy? Am I feeling any jealousy? And I really wasn't. And for me, that is enormous, like huge, like, oh my goodness. And I couldn't have done that on my own. Like I wasn't sitting there white knuckling it. It was like, I'm just here. And it's just, I'm so thrilled she's her. I'm so thrilled I'm me. And I can just be glad watching that. And then on Sunday, she said, hey, would you come up front and say a few things when I ask you to? Well, me 4 or 5 years ago, my perfectionistic self would have been like, no. And I didn't have my hair done. I didn't have my makeup. My toenails were chipped, Michelle. My toenails, and I didn't know what she wanted me to do. It turns out she wanted me to do a whole, a fair amount of speaking. And, I didn't have my notes. I didn't have my notes, Michelle. And I got up and did the thing, and it was such a wonderful feeling of freedom that I wasn't worried about if I was impressing anybody, if I was looking good. And because I think I'm finally realizing none of that matters. Nobody really cares if we're perfect. Nobody really cared. Nobody cared about my toenail polish. And if they did, whose problem is that? It's theirs, not mine.
Yes, exactly.
And in fact, if they had come and told me, I would think you would be more professional than to let your toenail polish be chipped when you're a professional speaker. I could have handled it. I would not have freaked out about it. But the opportunity was there for me to share some information that God's placed on my heart with a bunch of women who were ready and waiting, and I just went for it. And so that kind of fluid flexibility, freedom, that is something that I didn't even know was possible 5 years ago. And it has been much more possible in the last year. And it feels wonderful.
You know, one thing I've seen in you, if you don't mind me doing this, I did. I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but one thing I've seen in you is you have fully embraced, or you're in the process of fully embracing your good qualities as well as the things that you wish you could change. There's this sense of you are getting so grounded in this is who God made me, and I'm a sinful, broken woman, but for God, but for God, and there's this sweet joy in you learning to like yourself and be able to be yourself without explanation or defense or trying to make people like you.
I can honestly say I wouldn't be somebody else. I wouldn't trade with anybody else in the world. And I could not have said that even at the beginning of this year for sure. And I really wouldn't. And that doesn't mean I think I'm all that and a bag of chips. It just means I know me. And I'll take it. I'll take the good, bad, and the ugly and the journey that God's got me on. It's a good one.
I love that. And just for the record, I wouldn't want you to be anybody else. You are one of my favorite people and grow more so all the time. So I love all of the nuances about how unique you are. It's not the fact that you are you and there's nobody else who's you is what I love so much. Now, as we wrap up, a couple of people asked what resources we'd use to go through this. And I just want to clarify, Sherry's doing her own journey with her own therapist and friends and things. I'm doing my own journey with my own therapist, friends and things. We've just chosen to have places of interaction about the process, you know, occasionally, not all the time, but occasionally. This is just one safe place. As far as some resources that I recommend, for me personally, this is just, I believe this so firmly. The Word of God has got to be your go-to source for truth. It has to be. Every other book written, every other person you talk to is still human, okay? They're still human. They're still fallible. They still have their own sin problem and everything else. So your ultimate source has got to be God and His Word. On top of that, I've read books like this by Henry Cloud called Changes That Heal. Highly recommend this one. I have a therapist I've been going to off and on for 8 years, and I pick her brain and ask her for ideas. I've also read several books by, more spiritual formation books by Henry Nouwen, several by Henry Cloud, Henry Nouwen, Brennan Manning. I've read books on more childhood pain, like Childhood Disrupted, which is more science, as well as The Body Keeps the Score, which is more about healing from trauma. So there's lots of great resources out there. We'll put some of those in the comments. Do you have anything you would add, Sherry?
I'm going to recommend The Highly Sensitive Person for anybody listening who might be an HSP, because that has been such a huge eye-opener and part of what's really helped me accept that, no, I'm not a mistake. God actually wired me at a genetic level to be the way I am. And I'm not making excuses for the weaknesses. I think that's important to say, but for the ability to accept things that maybe society isn't so fond of, that's been really important.
The other one that's really good with identity work for, and everybody hates the word codependence, but the book Codependent No More was actually a very helpful book for me to understand boundaries, as well as Changes That Heal. And then Henry Cloud has a book called Boundaries as well. So there's just a lot of great resources, but I urge you that really make sure that everything that you read, including what Sherry and I talk about, funnels back through the Word of God and God Himself, and make sure that that is your ultimate source of truth. Because at the end of the day, Sherry and I both are two people with a terminal problem that we're powerless to fix, but we know the one who can save us. So Sherry, I love you.
Oh, love you too. Thank you so much. This has been great.
Thanks for being here. In fact, you engaged me so much, I didn't even dig into my chocolate bar that I have.
I'm better than chocolate? Whoa, that's an endorsement.
So fun. So thank you, Sherry. And I know you said you'd be willing to pop on Facebook a little bit there and leave some comments, but thank you for being with us and being willing to share so authentically from your heart.
Thank you for going first and modeling it and being one of my not just a safe friend, but one of my cheerleaders. So
Yay, I adore you. All right. For the rest of you that are listening, thank you so much for joining us. I know I went way over. I'm hoping the content is super helpful for you. And if you continue to have questions, don't hesitate to leave them in the comments. And we will see you next Monday at 9 a.m. Mountain Time for week 3. We'll dive into that. But between now and then, I'll be on Facebook and we'll continue to interact there. Have a great evening, everybody. We'll see you again soon.